So for today's lecture, it's going to be about the concept of bag of visual words. So it's a simple model that allows you to do some basic almost object detection or classification. And it's based on exactly the historical models that we have been seeing so far. It's quite easy, it's quite simple to understand, it's quite simple to relate to or to understand its intuitions. So I don't expect this to be like a very difficult lecture. From the contents of this lecture, we're going to be speaking a little bit about the origin of the concept of bag of words, which is something that comes from words, right? So natural language processing. And then we will go a little bit to what is bag of visual words model, and what are the different steps that are taken in order to build the bag of visual words model. And the final step would be the image classification, which is something that we have already seen, or which is something that we'll be building on top of what you have already seen with Professor Khan. So our goal in this task is to perform image classification so as we have discussed, right? So you're given a set of images which are positive for images that contain the class or contain the object that you're looking for. So in this case, for example, a motorcycle. And some negative training images that just don't contain the object that you're looking for, right? Now, if you look a little bit closer, you could see that all motorcycles have some smaller components that are shared between all of them, right? So here, for example, you can see they all have this wheel, right? The back wheel. They all have some sort of place where you can sit on, right? So they all share some small parts in small parts in that image, right? So if you want to classify a new test image to whether it contains the object you're looking for or not, what you could do is build a bag of visual words. So the bag of visual words would allow us to build some sort of lower level vector form that represents the class that we're looking for. So here, for example, we would have a bag that says that a motorcycle contains a front wheel, a back wheel, a seat, some sort of motor somewhere. So stuff like that. So these are the components, you could say, of what makes a bike, right? I don't know if this is a bike, this is a motorcycle. Yeah. So before we go a little bit deeper, we just wanted to explain the concept of weakly supervised learning. So weakly supervised learning is a technique that is used to simplify a little bit the task of annotation for humans, but still perform some good results or provide some good performances or in model accuracy. So it allows us to learn a model from a set of training images containing object instances without knowing the location or the absolute location of the object, right? So if you have done a little bit of object detection, which we will be doing later on just in this course, you will know that it's not enough to just give a class to an image, but we should also say where is the exact location of that class inside that image. But weakly supervised learning allows us to do just the bare minimum and still expect something in return. So it's much faster in terms of building, a data set. If you want to build a bigger data set, it's going to take you a lot of time to actually annotate every single image. But just providing those weakly supervised labels is a much simpler task than it is to provide a much detailed, exact location of these objects. So as we just discussed, so it contains whether there is an object or not, but it does not contain the segmentation of that object. Usually the task of segmentation is a very, very heavy task in terms of annotation. It takes at least 1 to 2 minutes to annotate just one image. So you can imagine if you have a data set of millions of images, or you have a data set of, I don't know, a little bit less, it's going to take you months or years to annotate such a data set. So for us today, we will see the 3 stages that we will be using to get into a trained classifier that could perform, classification on test images. The first step would be to represent each training image using a vector. And that's what we'll be using bag of visual words for, basically today's topic. Then we will train a classifier to discriminate vectors corresponding to positive and negative training images. This is exactly what you have taken with the Professor Khan's course. And then we will just apply that trained classifier to the test image. So this is just basic function application, right? So let's start with our bag of visual words. So the goal of bag of visual words is to first find these patterns that are always repeating in the images, right? So for example, here we can see that texture is something that is very much depicts the basic spatial repeating patterns in the image, and provides like a deeper understanding of what the constants are. So for example, this pattern could be associated with yogurt. I don't know, it could be associated with the dough that makes some pizza or something like that. So this is the texture of this pattern. The texture of this pattern is related to rocks. The texture of this pattern is related to radishes, or could be similar a little bit also to, what is it called, to strawberries, or any smaller vegetable. We're just talking about the texture in here, not about the details of the object, right? So just the texture in general, the repeating patterns. For example, for here, this is some sort of wall, also another type of wall. I'm guessing this is another type of wall. And here you can see that these are the basic three components that build our image, right? So this image, all of it is built by just a variation of these three smaller components. Same thing here, same thing here. So we can definitely understand that just by simply understanding the texture of the image and basically finding these elements that are just repeating, we can understand this image and hopefully understand the future images, whether they are similar to it or not. So this was the goal of so a bag of visual words, right? It takes the image in your data set, in your training data set, and tries to find these patterns that build your object. And then later on, in the new test image, it will just search for it and associate it to the class that is closest to it. So, just to read the text here, just to recap, texture is characterized by a repetition of basic elements or textons. So these are the elements or the textons that are basically repeating. And for stochastic textures, it is the identity of the textons, not their spatial arrangements, that matter, right? So it's not the fact that this circle is on the top or this circle is in the bottom. What matters is this circle exists, right? So it's not about the location of these textons, right? So if you have a face of a human being, it's still going to be detected by this model as a face of a human being if you put the eyes on top with the nose and the face and the mouth, or if you do something like this. And then eyes and then nose. So it doesn't really understand the concept of space, right? Or spatial information or spatial arrangement so far. But that's not a big problem because the majority of objects, it really doesn't matter whether the what is it called? The wheel is in the front or in the back, whether the hat is on top or if it's in the back or in the bottom. So usually these concepts, they really don't matter that much. But for some specific cases, they absolutely do, right? So if you're speaking about medical images and you would like to understand, for example, where's the location of the bone that is like not a bone that is dislocated or something like that, usually the location is very much important to understand. First of all, what is the bone that you're looking at? It doesn't matter because all bones look alike, right? But depending on the location inside the image, those bones get different names or different labels. Whereas in this case, it's just a whole and just a segment, right? So it's not something, it's just a texton, right, for us. So it's not something that we will attribute a different name to depending on its spatial arrangement. So again, as we said, we just build the texture recognition software. The technique that we're using is basically we just take this image, find some of these textons. We will see how do we find the textons. We've already seen it before, but we will discuss it soon, right? And then from here, we will build this beautiful, histogram that says this image is heavily characterized by these three textons, but not by these three. This image is heavily characterized by these 4, 5, but not by the rest. This image is heavily characterized by these and not by these. So here we can already see that there are different distributions for different types of textures. Or you could consider that these are different objects or different classes, and we can see that there is clearly a different distribution for different types of objects. So this distribution is related to, as we said, these textons or these universal texton dictionary, meaning this is a dictionary that contains all the textons in your, or the important textons in your data set, in your training data set. And we can see that from these textons, we can clearly have linearly separable, let's hope linearly separable probability distributions for each class. So bag of words was like a technique that was originally built in concepts like, what is it called? Help me, natural language processing. And the goal was to, for example, build things like basic understanding of the type of documents that we're looking for, right? So if the model is talking a lot about, I don't know, about atheism or talking a little bit about science and stuff, then they just say that this is atheism. If the newspaper mentions the word Jesus Christ a lot and mentions the word Christianity or church a lot, that means this newspaper article, it's more of a religious article. If the word or if the newspaper is mentioning terms, for example, education, kids, stuff like that, or children and stuff like that, that are representative, like elementary school stuff, then this is a parenting, newspaper, right? So based on the frequencies of these words, you can already understand what type of documents you are looking at without really understanding the relationship or the order between the words, right? So just the fact that this word is mentioned a lot tells you so many things about that model by default, or about that article directly. So for example, as a human being, you can already look at these smaller parts and you could tell what this is, right? So could somebody tell me what this is?
Motorbike.
Yeah, this is a motorbike. Somebody could say that this is some sort of a very beautiful car too, but it's one or both, right? One or the other. But it is definitely a motorbike. So here we could see how just from these informative or very, well, let's say, interesting areas or interesting parts of the image, we could already understand what the object is. So could somebody tell me again, how do we find local features that are very informative?
I think I don't understand the question.
How do you find places in the image or locations in the image that are interesting or informative?
Maybe we can identify the object from this local feature.
But how do you find them? How do you first say that this location seems interesting to me?
It's depend upon interest or what we're finding.
Could you repeat that, please?
Like what we are finding and what is our interest.
Yes, but we need like an algorithm, right? We need a technique that allows us to say that this location is interesting. This white background location is not interesting for me. But this is very interesting. How do we say that?
Maybe if we can find an algorithm that that finds like the components that stands out from the rest, like from the other components.
Well, let's go very simple, right? Remember the last lectures and try to find something that allows you to find interesting points in the image. Come on, all of this course was about finding interesting points in images. And throw any name from what we have seen on the last lectures, and it will be correct. Yes. So you can think of anything that is around edge detections, corner detections, all of those algorithms would work very, very well in here, right? So all of them, they would tell you that this location in the image has so many changes, or has a lot of like, you know, what are they called? The derivatives are changing a lot in this location. So this is a very interesting location. It could be an edge, it could be a corner, and we have so many techniques to use to basically find these good, potentially good locations, right? So again, so the goal of Bag of Visual Words is basically to take this object, which is an image, and to build this collection of local features which are informative about it, or another way to look at it, which is to build a collection of these local features that are interesting. It's just an interesting, right? So it's not something, just remember that this is not like deep learning. This is not something that is very deeply understanding what the object is. It's just basic understanding from the surface, right? So Bag of Visual Words model is one of the most important concepts in the computer vision field. Not that it is still being used till now, but representations of it are still found in different models, right? So as it is, it's not being used, but some of its concepts are still being used in larger models. And especially if you're going for the, what's it called, natural language processing field, then definitely such models still exist till now, right? For smaller use cases. And it is used to build accurate systems for image classification, content-based image retrieval, and many others. So the goal is to go, as we said, from this object to a bag of the words in this object. So we go from a face to a mouth, hair, jawline. I don't know what this is. Nose, eyes. This is the chin. And this is the necklace. And this, those were the eyebrows, right? So yeah, so we go from an object like this to a bag of words that could represent any similar object like this. So the goal was to say that objects that are similar to each other have or share similar interesting points, right? So as we said, all these bikes, they share the same concepts of, you know, two wheels, something where you could sit on, stuff like that, right? So they share these different words that we could see them repeating in all the different objects of the same class. So here we can see that we have a big data set, let's say, of only 3 images. In reality, we will have hundreds and hundreds of images, right? And we will build this bag of visual words, or this bag of interesting features that could contain, or that could exist in these different classes. And from here, we can definitely see that, for example, when it comes to the human face, we have the eye and we have the chin. Maybe this is the chin or something. I don't know what it is. It's very prevalent or repeating in all the human face images. We have the bicycle. And in here, we have this seat that is quite, you know, special for the bike, for these bikes. And it is always repeating in all of the instances of this class. For when it comes to this one, for example, we have this specific shape, which is the base of the, I think this is a violin, which is the base of this violin. And basically, this is the representation, or this is the histogram of the class violin. And we can clearly see that these histograms of the different classes are more or less linearly separable, meaning any classifier model that we will be using on top of these feature vectors will give us very good accuracy, right? So the standard bag of visual words pipeline is to first extract these features, cluster the features to form a visual vocabulary. So this is the codebook generation. We will see how to do that. This is a technique that you have already seen with Professor Khan, but we will just go through it very, very quickly in here. We will quantize these features using visual vocabulary and then represent images by frequencies of the visual words. So,
excuse me, sir. I have a question.
Yep.
When we do the histogram plot, so we need to use all visual words for the one image, or we can set a limit like according to our task.
You will see. You will see. You will see.
Okay.
Let me see. Oh, yeah, here. So you see, these are all the different, what are they called? Features, local features that you found.
Mm-hmm.
And boom, they are converted to, as you said, to a limit number of words, right? So you're not going to be using all of them. You're just going to be using a specific subset of them, right? Yeah, very good question. Thank you. So as we said, we will start by extracting the features. And the simplest way to do that is to use, the simplest way to do these feature extractions is to use any one of these methods that we have seen before. Any of them would give you something, right? It's not about being absolutely perfect. It's just having something, right? So learning the visual vocabulary, this is the visual vocabulary, quantizing the features using visual vocabulary. So these just putting them into like clusters, let's say, and we'll see what that means. Representing images by frequencies of visual words like that. And then on top of these frequencies, we will build a classifier. So the first step, which is feature extraction, we see that it's quite easy. We've seen how it's done. The second step is the codebook generation. So we have already extracted the feature vectors from each image in our datasets. Now we need to construct our vocabulary of possible visual words. So vocabulary construction is normally accomplished via k-means algorithm, where we cluster the feature vectors from step one. Does everybody remember what k-mean algorithm is? K-means clustering. Okay, I'll take that as an absolute no, and we will do a quick revision of k-means. As I said, this lecture is quite easy, so we can go through it very quickly and then revise, of course, k-means algorithm, and we will also see a future algorithm that we could revise too. So the resulting cluster centers, i.e. the centroids of k-means, how many centroids will you have? K, exactly, because that's the algorithm, right? So algorithm of k-means is an algorithm that looks into your data and finds the center of, or the k centers of your data that will reduce the variation within each cluster. So intraclass variation will be reduced by the k-means algorithm. So it will find us the cluster centers or the centroids, which are treated as our dictionary of visual words. So the first step would be to create a gigantic bag of visual words, but we're not going to be using all of that. So all of this vocabulary will not be taken. We will only take a few of them, which are the centroids of k-means that is applied to this big basically visual words, bag of visual words, right? And the centroids will be our new bag of visual words. So here what we do is we take the vocabulary constructions. This is the, what are they called? The vocabs or the words that we have found in our images. These are the features that we are finding in our images. We take those and we put them in a representation like this. So in a just a, what is it called? A vector form. These numbers will later on be clustered into 3 locations. So we could clearly see by the human eye that these are similar to each other. So this could be, for example, a wheel from image 1. This is a front wheel from image 2. This is a back wheel from image 3. This is an eye of, yes, this is an eye of some, what is it called, of a person. And this is an eye of another person. This is an eye of a third person. And this is the eye of a fourth person. And they're all the same, right? So all the images. So if we go back, right, here, say we have lots of images of faces. All of them are going to have eyes. All of these eyes are going to be in the initial, sorry, all of those eyes will be in the initial, this big possible visual words that we will have. So the big list of possible visual words, all of them will be, you know, eyes in here, but we don't need all of these eyes. We just need one eye, right? And then, of course, here then you will have other parts of the human body. Other clusters might have other, I don't know, parts of the bike. Other clusters might have other parts of the violin, as we've seen here, right? And what we will do is we will go from these, you know, lots of eyes, lots of bicycles, lots of, I don't know, lots of violins parts, and we will just merge all of them into their centroids. And this is the actual bag of visual words that we will be using. So in this case, it's just 3, but in real cases, it will be a lot more than that, right? So how does k-means clustering work? First, you select an initial centroids at random, given a number k. So it's up to you to decide what k is. There are lots and lots of different techniques that can allow you to find what is the most optimal, let's say optimalistic k possible. But once you get any given k, what you will do is you will select an initial centroid at random. So all of your centroids will be just put at random positions in the image, and then assign each object to the cluster that is closest to it. We compute the distance, or we compute the mean of each of the clusters that we have, right? So let's let me just open something here. It means clustering visual. This is a very beautiful website that explains k-means clustering very well, and I think it's better than the lecture a little bit. You cannot see the screen. No, you cannot see the screen. Absolutely not. How about now? Wow. Okay, now you can see it. So this is a very beautiful website that provides lots of visualizations for different types of what are they called? For different types of clustering algorithms. And it will tell you like some explanation and stuff like that. But the best thing is it works like this. So let's go with a pimple smiley face. So this is the data set that we have, right? And we just put, for example, randomly our 3 centroids. Now, the next thing would be to classify all of these basically objects, or all of these points, according to the closest centroid, right? And then from here, we can see that the blue points, can you tell me where is, on average, the location of the mean of the blue points? So all of these blue points, where is their mean?
Somewhere in the middle between these 2. Almost.
So here, right?
Yeah.
And there we go. So after we do that, it goes And then we go and we go and we go and we go. So as we can see, it's not a perfect model. And if we restart with a different centroid, so this is different centroids, right? Location, we can see that it works pretty well and it classifies these as a cluster, this is a cluster, this is a cluster. But if, let's see, let's go. Okay. So it worked, right? So it's nice. Yeah. As long as you put the initial centroids at as further away from each other as possible, randomly, hopefully, it will give you some good results. Okay, let's go. Yeah, this does not work very well, right? This is why we have other techniques like dbScan, for example. So there you go. This is how dbScan works, and this is how it clusters the different locations. I'm sure you have already seen what dbScan is and what k-means is, but it's going to be useful for today's lecture to just get a small recap about these things, right? So this is dbScan. It's able to find that this is first pattern, second pattern, third, and fourth pattern. Whereas for k-means clustering, it's never going to be able to do that, right? So as you can see, the shape of this one is highly nonlinear, and k-means is not going to be able to find such a cluster. Ta-da! There we go. This is dbScan. This is why dbScan is quite powerful. It's much better than k-means. But for our use case for today, we will be using just k-means because it is the simplest and it provides the most logical results, most trustworthy, repetitive performance results, right? Not like dbScan. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, and it's very difficult to get its to fine tune it or to give it the perfect hyperparameters for dbScan. Whereas for k-means clustering, as we said, there are so many techniques to find the perfect centroids or perfect initial centroids. And then there are so many good techniques to find the perfect K, right? So with k-means clustering, we're definitely able to find our best results very, very much easily, right? So it's, as we said, select the initial random position or starting point, assign each object to the cluster which is closest to it, compute each centroid's or each cluster's new mean, and then continue repeating this process again and again and again until there are no changes. So how are we going to be using k-means clustering, right? One of the most used clustering techniques is k-means, as we said. It's not a perfect algorithm, but it is the most used because it is the most reliable and it is the most repetitively, like, predictable how its behavior will be, right? So let's imagine we have 5 objects, say 5 people. For each of them, we know 2 features, height and weight. We want to group them into 2 clusters, right? So what we will be doing is we will initialize the value of the centroids randomly. For instance, we will randomly select, we will randomly select this centroid 1 to be 120 and 32, and the next one will be 113 and 33. We compute the Euclidean distance between each of the 2 centroids at each point in the data. So this is the Euclidean distance between them. Let's go back here, for example, 167 to 120. Plus 55 to 32, and that would give us something like 52, right? We got our distances. So for example, this one, is it closer to C1 or to C2?
C2.
It's closer to C2. This is the distance. What do you think?
I didn't get your question, like closer.
Is person 1 closer to C1 or to C2?
Distance. C1.
Yes. How about person 2?
C1, I think.
Again. How about person 3?
And C2.
How about person 4?
C1.
How about person 5?
C2.
Perfect. So as we have said, we will calculate the new cluster center or centroid 1 and centroid 2 based on the objects that they belong to or that belongs to them, right? So as we said, this is how we were going to cluster them. And from here, we will create the new centroid 1, which is equal to 167 plus 120 plus this one divided by 3. And the other point would be, and the y point would be 55 plus 32 plus 76 divided by 3, which is equal to 154 and 54 as a weight. Whereas the C2 will be equal to 113 plus 108 divided by 2, and 33 plus 25 divided by 2, which is 111, 110, and 29. So then we calculate the things again and see that they don't really move. And this will give us the 2 clusters in our data. So these were the data points that we used. Person 1 was a bit tall. He was a bit heavy, so like an adult. Person 4 was also a bit tall and also heavy because he was an adult. Whereas person 2, 3, and 5, they were short and they didn't really have a lot of, weight, mainly because they are not adults, they are kids. So here with k-means clustering, we found that there are 2 types of people, adults and kids. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is k-means clustering. It's a very simple algorithm that would allow us to basically go from this, lots and lots of what are they called? Words, basically vocabulary that is gigantic, into a much smaller vocabulary of a predetermined length that we set, right? So we set the k that we want. So this is a couple of cars. This leads to us generating this beautiful, what is it called?
Vocabulary of
vocabulary.
words.
Good. This is the vocabulary of the different words that are interesting. And you can see there's a lot and a lot of these, what are they called? Wheels, right? So you can already see that there are lots of wheels and the texture of these wheels is very common, right? So it's just a couple of white, or in this case, it's like white cells and lots of gaps in between them. So you see that this is a wheel, 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 this is a wheel. So lots of wheels. We're not going to include all of these wheels in our vocabulary, and we're not going to be like comparing every new image to hundreds of wheels that we have. We will just summarize all of these wheels into just one wheel, right? Which is the goal of basically the, what is it called? Which is the goal of k-means clustering. Here, for example, we have lots of images of people, for example, walking, but in the end, it's all a face, the legs, the shoes, just basic components that are always repeating in all of the faces or all of the images of the people. So given an arbitrary image, we can quantify and abstractly represent the image using the bag of visual words model. How will we do that? Using step 3. Extract feature vectors from each image, from the new image, basically. For each extracted feature vector, compute its nearest neighbor in the dictionary created in step 2. And this is normally accomplished using Euclidean distance. So let's go back. Say this is the new, so these are the cars that you built. This is all of their features. After k-means clustering, you get this new vector. This is the final vector that you will be using, right? This is the actual vector words. This is the actual bag of visual words that you will be using. Now you get the new image of a new car. what you will do, again, you will use some sort of edge detection technique or some sort of corner detection technique to find the interesting locations in the image. And for each one of these interesting locations inside the image, you will compare it with these different words. So these are the words in our vocabulary. We will compare each new, let's just draw a new car. So this is the new car. We will compare each new, feature in this new car to all of these different, vectors or these different words. And we will say that this is the closest to this one. This one is the closest to this one. And what we will be doing is we will compare each individual feature in here to what is the closest word in here. Basically, just using the basic, Euclidean distance, right? Based on basic Euclidean distance, we will first associate every single extracted feature vector into its nearest neighbor in the dictionary that we created in the step 2. What we will later then is we will take a set of the nearest neighbor labels and build a histogram of length k, where k is basically the number of clusters generated from k-means clustering in before. This process is commonly known as vector quantization, and it will give us the following. So this is the frequency of this bag of visual words that we have predetermined. So these are the words that we have in our data set, and this is their frequency. Another image would give you another frequency, another image would give you another frequency, and hopefully these frequencies will be easily separatable for the different classes. So here, for example, we have 4 object classes and a background. So the object classes are faces, motorbikes, airplanes, cars, and background. Background basically means nothing, right? So these are the positive samples. These are the negative samples. We create their feature vectors. They didn't speak about it. So we create their feature vectors. From these feature vectors, we will create basically their bags of visual words using k-means clustering. And then from there, we will build the ability to do vector quantization for new images. But for the training data set, we will use exactly their own, feature vectors and build a classifier. So the classifier that we will be building is a classifier that is based on their histograms or based on their, frequency, histograms, right? Based on their histograms, we will be building a classifier. These classifiers are very easy for you guys. So SVM, which is a linear classifier, or the k nearest neighbor classifier, which is a nonlinear classifier. In this case, KNN is definitely better as an option because you're already building it using the concept of k-means clustering, which is very similar to the concept of k nearest neighbors. So together, they usually give very good performances, but SVM is highly linear. And if you're going to be using the nonlinear version of SVM, it's still not as nonlinear as k nearest neighbors. So k nearest neighbor is definitely one of the best algorithms or best classifiers that you could use for this case. So here, this is the results of the weak supervision, right, for our training data set. And you can see that its results are between 98.3% and 100% correct, depending on, of course, the class. But still, I think that is not a bad result for something that is, as we said, weakly supervised. So it doesn't know which part of the image is the actual airplane, right? And it works with a lot of this noise. And still, even given all of this noise, it still works very well. So here we said training 50% of images, no identification of objects within the image, testing 50% of the images again, simple object present, absent test. So it's basic classification. It's not object detection. And the learning algorithm was a SVM classifier with a Gaussian kernel. Bag of visual words summary. Advantages. Largely unaffected by the position and orientation of the object, which is a good thing or a bad thing, right? So if you actually care about the location, the position of the object or the orientation of the object, then bag of visual words is not a good thing for you. So this is something that is good for it and bad at the same time. So it is fixed length vector irrespective of the number of detections. It's very successful in classifying images according to the objects they contain, and it still requires further testing for large changes in scale and viewpoint. So here, for example, what they used is cars, but only the rear view of a car. So if you change the viewpoint to like the front, the model just breaks, right? So as we said, this is impressive, but it's only impressive because we are building a very simple data set and a very toy example. This model in real life is not going to hold, right? It's not going to work. You're not going to be building something interesting with it. So it still requires further testing for large changes in scale and viewpoint. The disadvantages, no explicit use of configuration of visual word positions, and poor at localizing objects within an image. Of course, it doesn't localize the objects at all because it just tries to classify them. But if you wanted, you could have like said that, for example, let's go back. To something like this. So if you have, for example, a face inside an image, and you already are going to build, for example, this is a feature, this is a feature, this is a feature, this is a feature, and then you compare them to your, basically, you will compare them to your vocab. And what you could do is the places inside the image that contain a lot of the words that are associated with face, you could say that those are the places that contain the concept face, right? So the background will not contain any features that should be associated with the concept of face. Only the features which are inside the face will be associated, or will be, when you calculate that Euclidean distance. Yeah, when you calculate that Euclidean distance, this one, at this step, this could tell you where the actual object you're trying to look for is located. That could be just a hint, right? But the actual algorithm is not really built to do stuff like that. It's not built to do localization of objects. You could just try to manipulate it to find a potential location of your actual object. And just like a reminder, this is a weakly supervised model, and it is still able to find potential locations of the objects. This is why it's quite powerful, right? So it's not, it is a smart thing, right? It's not a very basic technique, right? But still, it's doesn't give good performances. It is powerful in the fact that it, even though it is weakly supervised, it is still able to do basic, very basic object detection, but it doesn't give good results. So thanks a lot, guys. But before we finish, we could go back a little bit and see what is k-nearest neighbors classifiers. So we have already seen what k-means clustering is. Here we will talk a little bit about k-nearest neighbors, right? So does everybody know what k-nearest neighbors classifier is? KNN? Nope. Yeah, I'll take that as a nope. So KNN is a very simple classifier. You guys have already seen it with Professor Khan. I am sure about that. And you guys already know, I think the majority of you already know it. But just for the sake of like repeating it, the basic idea is if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, then it's probably a duck. Meaning if it shares a lot of similarities with a duck, then it is probably a duck, right? So we have a training data set here. This is our training data set, and this is our test sample. We have a new image that is test sample, and what we will do is we will give it the class of its nearest records. How do we choose the nearest records? Very basic. So the learning task is given a training set of lots of x's, and basically, yeah, XY labels, right? So XY labels do absolutely nothing. That's why it's called a lazy learner. So with k nearest classifier, the training, or when you build the model in sklearn and say sklearn.knn, and then you build it and you do knn.fit xtrain ytrain, that function does absolutely nothing, right? It just saves the xtrain, saves the ytrain locally, and keeps it inside your basically your model. But it doesn't do any learning. Unlike, for example, SVM or decision trees, it will build a decision tree, or for logistic regression, it will try to find the coefficients, etc. But for KNN, it's not going to do any of that. It's just going to save the data set as it is. All of its work will be happening at the classification location. So at the classification task, we will be doing a lot of the work. So here, given an instance XQ, this is the instance that we're going to classify. What we're going to do is we will find in the training set instances XI that are the most similar to XQ. And what we will do is we will return the class value YI. So let's do an example here. Say that this is class 1. And this is class 2. They're both very easily separable, but just for an example. And say you get a new point. Here. So say we got a new point here. This is our new point. We don't know what is the class of this new point. So what we will do is we will calculate the distance between this point and all the other points in the data set. And whatever point is closest to it, we give its class. So here we can see that this is closest to class 1. So we say that this point is class 1. This is the point, let's say here. We don't know what is its class. We look for the closest points related to it, and we give it their same class. Make sense? I hope so. For k nearest neighbors, just remember that this k is a hyperparameter, meaning in this example that we just given here, the k is equal to 1 because we're looking for just the closest xq to xq. But in general, you could set k to, for example, 5 or 3 or some number like that. And it's not going to just look for the most similar value. It's going to look for the 3 most similar or the 5 most similar points to that. And then it will return their average class value. So here it is. This is just the difference between the 1 KNN and 5 KNN. So very big, as we said, issue here that if you use 1 KNN, it's going to classify it as a positive. If you use 5 KNN, it's going to classify it as a negative. If you use probably 7 KNN, it's going to classify it again as a positive. So different Ks will give you absolutely different results. So just be careful about that. And then, of course, there are different metrics, distance metrics that we could use. There's the typical Euclidean metric, which is most likely the one that you're going to be using. There's the cosine metric if you're going to be working in a very high dimensional data set, and there's the chi-squared data if you are going to be using some specific data sets that require the chi-squared. K-nearest neighbors is in fact quite competitive still till now, even with like the Euclidean, just basic Euclidean distance, right? It is still quite competitive. As you can see here, its test error rate is 5%, meaning it is accurate 95% on this image data set, right? And with CNNs, you would get that up to like 3 or 2%. So its difference from like a very complicated CNN is not that big. So it's quite competitive. Like the K-nearest neighbors is quite a competitive algorithm. So this is it for today's lecture. It was quite simple, I hope. It was quite fast. As we said, the content is going to be like very easy for this lecture, and I think we will include it in the midterm, since it's quite easy, and it's just going to be a couple of bonus points. For your midterm, the midterm is going to be very, very simple, very easy. As I said, you're allowed to use any lecture notes that you have. You're allowed to use Google. You're allowed to use ChatGPT. If you're using Notion AI, you're allowed to use Notion AI. If you're using, I don't know, Bing, you can use Bing. Whatever it is that you want to use, you're allowed to completely use it, no problem. Just don't cheat with your colleagues, right? Just don't ask your fellow friends or fellow students for help on the questions. There will be 30 questions, and the time is 45 minutes. According to other students who have passed similar exams or similar format, ChatGPT was quite useless. So I highly recommend just using Google and lecture slides at first. And then if you don't get it and you're like, you're gonna die soon, just go with ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT or Bing maybe what the potential answer could be. But just remember that there will be negative points. So if you make an error on one thing, for example, this question has like 7 options, and only one of them is correct. And if you, for some reason, select all the other 6 points and the correct one, you don't select it, so you don't get a +1, you get a -6, right? So do be careful at like trusting some, you know, AI in giving you the correct answer, because if the answer is incorrect, then so we don't need to be in class. Is it online? It's gonna be in class. It's gonna be with Batul. She will be watching you guys to make sure that you don't talk within each other and that you don't use like those shared docs or shared Telegram groups where you could just discuss the answers. But it will be like quite an easy thing. Just go on into the university, just sit there, 45 minutes, everybody leaves, and you get your grade. Again, there will be negative points. No, exactly, that's the thing. All of them, some of them, they have multiple answers. And since the options are numerous, so you will have, I don't know, 6 or 7 options, making a random guess would destroy your grade. You can have -5 by the end of your exam, right? So just do be careful about that. The questions are very easy, but if you don't understand a question and you don't want to risk it, don't answer it. Not answering is much better than answering something that is wrong. Okay? So you can use ChatGPT, but if it makes a mistake, like your whole life is dead. From the
Yeah,
other,
we understand the things.
Nice.
So all material from the lectures, is it enough for the quiz? Yeah.
Oh, of course, yeah. The content for the quiz will be literally just copy pasted from the lecture slides. So I'm just gonna go to the lecture slides and just copy paste the questions directly. So honestly, the lecture slides are everything that you're gonna need. But
Yeah.
I know some of you guys would like to just try a little bit ChatGPT and stuff like that. So definitely give it a try. And you have enough time, right? So it's 30 minutes, 30 basic minutes in 45 minutes. So the majority of the students, for example, for the last quiz, they finished in 20 minutes, and they just spent the rest of the time trying ChatGPT and seeing if it works or not. All good?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Just a reminder, this course is not a course that you guys will fail. So everybody's going to have an A or a B. So really no stress, right? So no stress at all. So thanks a lot, guys, for attending. I will post this lecture recording on YouTube, and I will post the lecture slides on Moodle. Please prepare very well for your quiz, and definitely do not forget about your project, right? The semester project.
Yeah, okay.
Good luck, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Have a great day.
You too.